this meeting. Oh, okay, it's recorded. Okay. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming today. I know it's a little short notice, but we have a few more people coming in. We're not going to take attendance today because we're not voting on anything. So I want to thank Mia Summers for volunteering to take today's minutes. And I think I'll just introduce CFO Lloyd Blanchard. He's going to talk today about the proposed tuition increases for year ending 2025. So CFO Blanchard, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Oh, kind of.
Kind of? Okay. I saw a thumbs up from Hiram. Let me turn up my end. Never good. I'm better at Teams than with WebEx, but I'm sure you've heard this before. Let's see. Is that better? Is that better? Can you hear me better?
Yes, it's better. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to share my screen, if you don't mind. So do you see the title slide? It says tuition and fees proposed for FY 2024. All right. So good morning, everyone. I'm Lloyd Blanchard. I'm the CFO of the system. I've been with this system for about 3 months now. Prior to that, I was the CFO and the budget director at UConn for the past 6 years or so, almost 7 years. So I'm here. I came to CSEU because it is my opinion that this is where the state's workforce is educated. And I wanted to be a part of this group of students rather than those at UConn, because you represent the majority of college students in the state of Connecticut. But we are proposing to the Board of Regents next Wednesday increase in certain tuition and fees, and I'll walk you through that. So last couple of weeks ago, we presented to the board our projected deficits for FY25 and for 24, but we feel like we're gonna balance our budget for FY24, which is the current fiscal year. But the next fiscal year, FY25, which begins July 1 in 2024, we're facing large deficits. As you can see at the bottom right, we're expecting a deficit of $140 million next fiscal year. That $140 million represents about 10% of our overall spending across 4 universities, 12 community college campuses of CT State, and Charter Oak Online College. Why are these deficits so large? Well, these are 5 reasons why the deficits are so large for FY25. First, we've been dealing with enrollment declines for some time now here in the state of Connecticut. This is a challenge being faced by all higher education institutions, particularly in the New England states. This is a demographic story. The younger parts of the country are in the South and in the West, and the older parts of the country are in New England. And so as our population ages and have fewer children, we see fewer students graduating from high school and going to college. And that's what we've seen over the last 10 years here in Connecticut. Number 2, simply because of the enrollment decline, we have fewer revenues from tuition and fees. That's a pretty straightforward story. That's true for both CT State Community College and the universities. Of course, number 3, the pandemic really affected all of us in a lot of different kinds of ways. It affected businesses, it affected governments, and certainly it affected us at colleges and universities. We did get some one-time funds from the federal government to help make it through that period. But if you go to number 4, those one-time funds ended before enrollments recovered. The block grants increased a little bit, but it was the one-time support that was in large numbers because of the pandemic. That money has gone away. And that's what's creating a problem for us, because it's gone away before our enrollments recovered. And finally, number 5, fringe costs continue to be a major driver of the growth in costs that we face. And I'll explain this more. So let's look at, this is about the state appropriations. Don't worry about the technical stuff. That approved per HB 6941, that's simply the law that passed the appropriations. So you'll see the top part of this table shows the appropriations that were approved for the current biennium. The biennium includes the current fiscal year, FY24, and the next fiscal year, FY25. And the bottom part is sort of extra state support beyond the block grant. So the top where it says state appropriations, those are block grants that go to one part of our system or another part of our system. The bottom part of this chart shows the extra funds that are provided for one reason or another. And you can see the PACT program, that's the free community college program. In FY24, the state provided $23.5 million for that, and they'll provide $28.5 million in FY25. So that's a good thing for our community college students. And you'll see that the increase from 23.5 to 25.5 is kind of offset by the decrease of 6.5 for enhanced retention. But that's a net positive for the PACT program for community college students. The problem is the one-time funds going away. So those highlighted lines that say provide operation support and provide temporary operating support, you'll see what they were in FY24, $147.7 million. That will now in 25 be $48 million. That's a $100 million reduction. Let me say that again. That's nearly a $100 million reduction in one-time support. And if you see that last line, $55 million, that went down to 27, so that's an extra $27 million reduction. This is a major reason why we are facing such large deficits in FY25. Fringe costs are extraordinarily high as well. So recently, the state made a cost swap. Let me see if I can explain. Previously, the state and public higher education here in Connecticut have shared in all of the fringe costs for state employees that work in our system. Fringe costs include state retirement costs, and they include non-state retirement costs. The non-state retirement costs are those things like healthcare costs, Social Security costs, other costs that are taken out of our paychecks every 2 weeks. The retirement costs are also taken out of our paychecks, but that's the pension, right? That's the pension costs for public employees in the system. And then the green line, so the retirement costs are the gray bars, the non-retirement costs are the orange bars, and then the green bars are how much we pay for these fringe costs. And by we, I mean you as students through your tuition and fees. Now, what you'll see is we've been paying about $81 million going back to FY15. We've been paying about $81 million. That's gone up to $99 million in FY18. And then it began to come down, still around the 90s and the 80s. But during the pandemic, we got more assistance through those one-time funds. So in FY22 and 23, we paid $44 million and $54 million for fringe costs. You see the fringe costs going up, despite the fact that we were paying less. But all of a sudden, the state raised our portion of the fringe costs to $129. And basically, they took on all of the retirement costs. That's the gray bars. And the state says higher education will now pay for all of the non-retirement fringe costs. That's the orange bars. But we're not quite there yet. They want us to pay 171 and 178 in 24 and 25. They're giving us $42 million in help to pay for that, but it still increases what we will pay for fringe relative to what we paid in 23. So you'll see in FY23, we only paid for $54 million of the $159 million in non-retirement fringe. Now we're expected to pay $129 million this year and $136 million in FY25. So the difference between that 136 and 54, that's $82 million. That's the impact of this fringe swap deal. It was a deal that was constructed for UConn. I know that because I was fighting for this deal when I was still at UConn, but now I'm with you here at CSU, and it was a bad deal for us. So we're really fighting the state to try to help them understand that. This is the deficit mitigation plan that we presented to the board a couple of Wednesdays ago. You'll see in the right under the FY24 and FY25 shows the deficits. Focus on FY25. That's the $140 million that I showed you earlier. Our plan to deal with that $140 million deficit, again, 10% of our budget, is to mitigate about $106 million of that and ask the state for the balance, which is 47.6. Now, that's not going to add up to 140 because the deficits are specific to two institutions. I'm sorry, the sum of the deficits make it more than the aggregate deficit, which nets some institutional surpluses against other institutional deficits. That probably wasn't as clear, but I'll try to clarify it later. You'll see of this $106 million mitigation, we'll get 29.8 from new revenues, 48.6 from expenditure reductions, and then we'll use $20 million worth of cash and ask the state for 47. You look at that new revenue initiatives, number 2 in orange, we assume tuition and fee increases within that number. In fact, of that $29.8 million, we're assuming about $20 million of new revenue from what we will propose next Wednesday to increase tuition. So this is what we will propose next Wednesday. And we are here to speak with you because if we are going to propose to increase tuition, we need to talk to those who we're proposing to impose these costs on. And that's you, the students. So we're proposing to increase tuition by $334 for the state universities. We're proposing to increase the mandatory fees by $276. And then for those students who stay in the dormitories at the state universities, they would face a $234 increase in their room rate and a $146 increase in their food service rate. For those who are CT state students and not eligible for PACT, they would face a $216 tuition increase and a $30 fee increase. Charter Oak, our online college, is not proposing a tuition increase at all. You can see in the footnotes that the room and the food service increases will be slightly different depending upon which state university we're talking about. And you can see that there's some differences in housing fees for the 4 universities and differences in food service fees. Nevertheless, this is where we are today, comparing our 4-year universities with UConn and other 4-year universities across New England. We're still in a competitive place in terms of how much we charge our students. And also, our tuition and fees for our community college students is also very competitive relative to other institutions, other community colleges in the New England states. So that's my presentation. I'm happy to take your questions.
Hi, my name is Nanette from CT State Norwalk. I wanted you to elaborate more on the fringe costs. I'm not exactly sure what it would mean.
Yeah, so thank you for that question. This is the most complex part of this whole conversation. So as a state employee, I get paid a salary and I get benefits, right? My benefits are my pension contributions and my health care, basically. And I also make contributions to Social Security, just like anybody who collects a paycheck. These are the costs that are taken out of their paycheck, right? So fringe costs are those benefits costs, right? And there are two types of costs. There are state retirement costs, right? So that's my pension. And there are sort of healthcare costs and other costs, right? That's all part of, when I say fringe, I'm saying fringe benefits, okay? These are some of the most expensive costs in higher education because all state employees have fringe benefits, but the state covers those costs. For example, the state employees in the Department of Transportation, the state employees in the Department of Social Services, and other agencies throughout the state, those state agencies do not pay their employee fringe costs. The state does. But because we have extra revenue lines, they impose some of those costs on our revenue lines, tuition being the major revenue line that we have to pay some of those costs. And the state has told us straight up, you pay some of your own fringe costs because you have your own revenue. And so that's a debate I continue to have with the state because I do not believe public higher education in the state of Connecticut should be paying these fringe costs. What this slide shows is what the state tried to do recently, starting in FY24, to try to change that picture, right? And what they did was say, okay, the state will now pick up all of the retirement costs, pension costs, that's the gray bars, right? And you could see the big numbers associated with that cost. And you could, and the state said, public higher education, you will now pick up all non-retirement fringe costs, and we will help you with that transition. So they're telling us that in FY24, we've got to pay $129 million of the total $171 million of the non-retirement fringe costs of our employees. And the difference, 171 minus 129 is 42, is what they gave us in our block grant. So that's the help they're giving us. But what they don't realize is they made us, our increase in those costs went from 54 in FY23 to 129 in FY24. That's a $75 million change. And then in FY25, it's going to be 136. That's an $82 million change. If I'm doing my math right, yeah, 82. So that's how the state, in the way it's funding its fringe costs, the change in the way they did that really hurt us. It helped UConn, but it hurt us. And that's the sort of fight that I'm having with the state.
Okay, so according to this chart, the state intends to eventually have us pay for the complete cost of the non-retirement cost.
They want us to pay, they've given us the $42 million this year, FY24, to make up the difference between the 129 and the 171. That's correct, Nanette. They want us to pay all the non-retirement fringe costs. And they increased our block grant by the difference between that 171 and the 129 for FY24, and difference between 178 and 136 in FY25. But your statement is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Other questions?
Hi, CFO Blanchard. I definitely have some questions. So I'll be honest, I don't understand a lot of this. So I had two questions. Number one, will we be getting a copy of this slideshow so that we can kind of sit and muddle over it a little more?
I can share copies of this. I don't want this to be out before I make it public at the board, at the finance committee meeting on Wednesday. So on Wednesday, I can share these slides with you and Carla.
Okay, thank you. So another question I had was, did we know that this was coming? And if we did, why wasn't more done? I'll ask the first question. Did we know that was happening? That this was gonna?
So did we know that the state was going to change the way they fund fringe? Yes. And we've been arguing with the state for a year or more over this issue. Now, when I say we, I mean CSCU. I've only been the CFO here for 3 months. So most of that time I was arguing with the state as the Yukon CFO. Now I'm arguing as the CSCU CFO. The deal was far worse for CSCU than it is for Yukon. That was a problem. This previous issue of this reduction, no, we did not know this. They kept saying that you need to prepare for the loss of the one-time funds that were used for the emergency, for the pandemic. And we knew that we had to prepare for the loss of the emergency funds. The problem is, Carla, that the state was using some of these one-time funds to pay for permanent increases in costs as a result of the CBAC collective bargaining increases, which increase every year, mostly, but they were using one-time funds to cover recurring costs. And so when those one-time funds go away, the costs don't go away. And that's part of why the deficit got so large. I hope that's clear.
Yes, thank you. That was very helpful. We have a few more questions. Bernard?
I'm gonna stop sharing my screen and just take my punishment like a man. So I'm happy to take more questions.
Hello, my name is Smith Bernard from Nordic Valley Community College or
Hi,
campus.
Smith.
My question is more of a clarification. For the fiscal year 25, with the change in tuition, there'll be more money, and I just want to correlate the fiscal year to the academic year, and when those change in tuitions would hypothetically take place.
So that's a very good question. The academic year starts next fall. The tuition increases will be applied beginning in the fall of 2024. So that's next fall. The fiscal year begins July 1, 2024. So the academic year will be fall 24, spring 25, and the associated intersession in the summer, right? That falls within the fiscal year. The fiscal year begins in July and ends at the end of June. So the academic year is fully within that fiscal year, except for the last summer session, right? Which is a little odd.
Okay, thank you.
I believe Toby has his hand up. I'm sorry, Toby and then Luis.
Sorry, my voice is cracking, but I'll do the best I can. I don't think we're looking at this as something we need to be fighting for, and I think that's exactly what we're going to have to do. In the 1800s, the minimum education requirements for America to be successful was 8th grade. By 1920, it was 12th grade. By 1960, it was a college degree. and they open the community colleges. I will dare say in 2023, it's a 4-year degree. America needs people to succeed at that level. And what we're doing is bankrupting, and then on the backside, not giving people the proper compensation to justify the debt they're taking on. So yeah, we might be competitive, but we're in a downward cycle, a race to the bottom. We lose this battle, in 5 years is going to be another battle, and they're going to hit us harder again. We gotta step up to the Democratic, Republican Party and the Wall Street corporations that run them, and force them to start chipping in and stop taking it off the backs of students and faculty. That's what's going to happen. You can fight now or you can fight later, but believe me, there's going to be a fight because they're never going to stop coming. And I'll stop there.
Thank you for your comment, Toby. I happen to agree. I am in a tough spot because while I agree with your critique, I have a duty, I have a fiduciary duty to balance the budgets of the universities within this system. And the state has imposed these changes on us. It's the state that has reduced their support with the full knowledge that in order for us to make up the deficit, we have to raise our own revenues and cut our own costs. And so I agree with you, Toby. I would recommend to the students that you let your voice be heard. Let your voice be heard to the members of the Board of Regents, partly through your own representatives in Carla and Luis, who are student members of the Board of Regents. Next Wednesday, we're going to present what I've presented to you here today to the Finance Committee of the Board of Regents, who will vote on whether to recommend or not these increases to the full board. Let me make sure I'm clear about this. This is just me giving you a preview of what I will propose to the Finance Committee on Wednesday. The Finance Committee will go through this process, ask questions, and they will either vote for it or against it. You should let your voice, your concerns, your opinions be known. Not only to the members of the Board of Regents, but also to your legislative representatives who will ultimately, pass the budgets for the universities, during session. And that's who we have to respond to. When they pass the appropriations laws and they fall short of what our needs are, these large deficits happen, and we have to find a way to overcome them. And we can only overcome them through increases in tuition or through reductions in costs and the use of cash reserves. There are only two major sources of revenue for most of our colleges: state support and tuition. So when the state reduces that support, they know that we will have to rely more on our students. Luis, you had a question.
Yeah, thank you, Chief Blanchard, for your comments. And I think as a collective, it's important to let our voices be heard. And, I think, for example, the tuition increase for the state university is like $334. That it's gonna be increased for some people that cannot be doable. That might be limited to how much they can afford the education for that semester. So we got to take it in account, and I think that we as students should stand for not letting the tuition be raised. My question is, do we have an alternate plan if the tuition increases doesn't go through? What would be the following steps that you would take if this doesn't go through, and how much it would affect the proposed mitigation plan?
If tuition does not get passed, if the tuition increase does not get passed by the board, then it will increase the projected deficit of $140 million by about $20 million. So it would move that projected deficit for FY25 to about $160 million, which means we've already presented to the board a plan to deal with $100 million of that. It would just take out $20 million that we included in that plan. So it would mean that our $100 million mitigation effort goes to about $80 million. So, so it just means that we're going to have to go further down the expenditure cut road.
And I guess my following question would be, where would if, let's say the tuition doesn't get passed, the tuition increase doesn't get passed, what would you think would be the next things to get cut as a way to save more money? And
well, we would have to go back and look at how much more cash can we use. We have to go back and look at how much more expenditures can we cut. We have to go back and look at what can we do to create new revenues through new students, not through increasing the rate, but increasing the numbers of enrollment, right? That cuts against the demographic story I told earlier about the declining high school graduates and the college goers. So these are fundamental changes that are fundamental challenges that that we'll have to go back to try to deal with. We will ask the state, Luis, as I mentioned earlier, we plan to ask the state for $47.6 million. If the tuition does not pass, we will have to ask the state for $67 million, or deal with that $20 million partly through asking the state, or partly through cash, partly through expenditure reductions.
yeah, I think it's important, and I want to commend everyone here. Talk to your legislators, local legislators. They're the ones that are gonna vote on how much money and affordability or institutions are gonna get. Chamber of Commerce's, contact them through their website. I think the more we can get students to talk to them in person and let them know how they're gonna be impacted by this, the more likely we're gonna get to get support and get more funding for our school. So I don't think anyone here wants to see a tuition raise, so we should definitely organize and try to get our voices heard. Thank you,
Luis.
Chair.
Thank you very much. I believe we have now Hiram and then Nanette again.
Hello, I hit the wrong button. How are you doing?
I'm well, thank you.
That's good to hear. I actually have a two-part question, if that's okay, because the first question leads into the other. So, do you know if PACT funding, what if it doesn't get fully spent, what happens to the excess PACT funding, and even does it get fully spent? Out of curiosity.
So it's a very good question. It is. I don't know the answer to what happens if it doesn't get spent, but I do know that because the appropriations co-chairs asked us whether it was enough to cover the costs. And we found that it was not enough to cover the costs. So I believe I showed you, we got $23.5 million in PACT funding for the current fiscal year. Our analysis showed that it was short by about $4 million. But you notice that there was a $5 million increase in that PAC. So we expect that it's going to be enough. But it's hard to predict how many people will show up, right? And so I do not know what would happen if the PACT funding was not spent, meaning there was not enough enrollment to use all of the PACT funding. My guess is, and it's just a guess, but I think it's an educated one, that it would just roll over into the next fiscal year if it's unspent. But so far, we haven't seen unspent PACT money.
That makes sense to me. And then my second question was, since we know, well, I don't like the word traditional students because it's more just like fresh out of high school students that graduate in Connecticut that get PACT funding, and calling a non-traditional student, non-traditional for like being from a different state or not being the same age group doesn't feel right to me. But so tuition increases probably most affect non-traditional students because PACT funding will just the tuition increases happen. PACT funding should just get rid of that anyway, at least for community colleges anyhow, besides like book fees and whatnot, if they're still covered. My question is the tuition increase is it assuming that the I'm tripping over my words, I apologize.
You're fine,
Is it
you're fine.
assuming the enrollment stays the same or is it assuming enrollment continues to decrease?
So that's a very good question, or set of questions. Let me try the last one first. The tuition increase, I said that we expect to get about $20 million in new revenues from the tuition increase. That number assumes current levels of enrollment. In other words, no change in enrollment. If we get more enrollment, we'll get more of that $20 million. If we get less enrollment, we'll get less of that $20 million. Now, to the PACT issue, it is my understanding that PACT will be expanded beyond just the first year, first-time freshmen. So I would look up the eligibility requirements on that for you community college students. That expansion is one of the reasons why they increased the funding for it. So it should touch more than just the first-time, first-year students, but I'm not sure of that. You'll have to check with the CT State's website for that. Nanette, and then Carla.
I just wanted to confirm. So this tuition increase is planned to happen in fall 2024, correct?
That's correct.
So that means we only have the spring semester to try to fight these.
You want to start Wednesday. Okay, so Wednesday we will present this to the, I'll give you the process.
Okay.
Wednesday, I will present this presentation to the Finance Committee of the Board of Regents. They will vote on whether or not to make the recommendation to the full board of whether they should increase tuition or not. So all that vote does is whether the committee wants to recommend to the board to do so or not. If they vote no, it does not go to the board and it's dead. So the Finance Committee has to recommend to the board to raise tuition, and then the board on December 14th has to vote yes or no. So it'll face two considerations, right? Wednesday for the Finance Committee, if they vote yes, it will go to the board on December 14th. If they vote no on Wednesday, it will die right there. If they vote yes and it goes to the board on December 14th, the board can vote yes, in which case tuition will take place. Tuition increase will take place. We have the authority already from the state to raise tuition. If the board votes no on December 14th, then there's no tuition increase.
That means we're running very short on time then. We only have about 14 days. And what could we do within that time to change their mind? Apart from your presentation, is there anything that we could do as community colleges to?
Well, I think through your own voices and the voices of your representatives, communicate with your leaders of your campus, leaders of the institution, representatives of the board, and your own legislative representatives. Meaning wherever you live, you know, you'll have at least two representatives, right? One in the House and one in the Senate.
Okay, thank you.
Carla?
Hi, thank you. So this is all really concerning to me because tuition increases affects and hurts our most vulnerable students, which is the community college students. And it it just kind of piggybacking on what we've all kind of been saying is that it does feel like a slippery slope if this passes. I mean, every time Pell Grant goes up and increases, tuition is increasing, and I feel like that's a big issue. So that was just kind of a statement that I had. Also, I was wondering, why is Charter Oak not raising their tuition? What's the story behind that?
So these are good questions and comments. Let me start with Charter Oak. Charter Oak, it may be the one institution that is facing increasing enrollments. And so they are not facing the fiscal challenges and deficits the way the more traditional campuses are. Let me explain the sort of challenge that we face managing the budgets for these universities and colleges. Let's talk about the expense side first, right? In order to run these large operations across the state, we spend about $1.4 billion across the system. Every year, those costs increase for two reasons. One, inflation. Just, whatever we buy is more expensive. Whether it's pens or pencils, or you paying the utility bills, or having contracts with vendors. That's always more expensive because of inflation. Two, because of salary increases that are negotiated with our unions. And when we give union represented employees increases in salaries, we also give those increases to non-union represented employees. That latter increase is a major part of our challenge because employees represent 70 to 75% of our budgets. It's a little different based on whether you're at a 4-year or a community college. That proportion is higher for community colleges, a little bit smaller for 4 years because the 4-year universities buy more equipment and things. So they have larger non-personnel costs. But by and large, the major portion of our budget is personnel costs. And the major portion of the personnel costs is the fringe costs. And so personnel costs are, the salaries and then the fringe benefits, right? And we have some of the highest fringe benefits in the country. And we are the only state agency in Connecticut that have to bear these costs. And so those are concerns that I have about how the state's policies support higher education. Now, the last collective bargaining increases have been about 4.5% to 5% per year. In order to pick up the extra costs each year because of those increases, we have to have increases in revenues. Now, we only get revenue from two sources, state and students. If the state reduces that support, guess where we have to go? So this is the tough part of running a large organization, just as it is running a business. If your costs go up, you need to increase your revenues to cover them. If you can't increase your revenues, you have to cut your costs. If your revenues go down, you have to cut your costs.
Thank you. I think Smith Bernard has one last question, and then we'll just, I know CFO Blanchard has limited time with us. We appreciate having you here.
Happy to be here, Luis.
Yeah. Go ahead, Smith.
Thank you. And thank you, CFO Lloyd, for the time. My last question is about jumping off what Nanette said earlier about the Board of Regents Finance Committee meeting and the full Board of Regents meeting. Would those be available to the public? And whether it be just like this meeting where we're able to join in, or it will be live streamed? I'm just asking, will it be available to the public? Yeah.
So Wednesday's meeting is a special meeting of the committee. I'm not sure if they, during special meetings, allow for public comment. But certainly the full board meeting on December 14th will allow for public comment. And so what I would recommend is that you communicate your concerns immediately to members of the Finance Committee. And you will see who's on that, your representatives, Carla and Luis, can provide that information for you. But certainly it will be live streamed on Wednesday, but I'm not sure that you'll have the ability to speak.
Yeah, I believe that I'm for sure going to try to be there and advocate for us, the students, to not try to increase the tuition, because it's something that affects all of us, whether you come from any type of background. I think it's definitely something that's gonna impact our education and how can we spend our money and how much hours are you gonna be working if we're paying it ourselves. So I think it's definitely something that is going to impact us, and we should really strive and work hard towards try to mitigate this and put pressure on the state, because as CFO Blanchard explained, part of the problem is that they have decreased the amount of money they're providing from fringe benefits. Last question, CFO Blanchard. It's regarding hiring. So are we still hiring more people to the institutions? Because I know that, like you mentioned, that's a big cause, and how we looked into reducing personnel that is not needed in many institutions.
So we are still hiring for key positions, but we're doing more non-hiring than hiring. For example, when there are vacancies, we make a decision of whether to refill that vacancy or not. So we are at a point now where we are not refilling more than we are refilling, because we have to refill some of those vacancies. We still have to operate the colleges and universities, and we just have to operate them with fewer dollars. And so we are hiring, Luis, but we are not hiring as much as we are not hiring.
Yeah, that makes sense. You got to keep a university going, so you still need personnel. I want to thank everyone for participating in this meeting. I think it's being very informational, and I just want to reassure you that Carla and I, we're going to be fighting for you guys and for the students across the state universities and community colleges to try to stop this tuition increase. I think it's going to affect many of us, especially low-income students and students that come from first-generation households, and everyone as a whole, So this is something I find definitely worth fighting. So thank you, CFO Blanchard, for your time.
Thank you for allowing me to come. I'm sorry for the news, but I'm glad we were able to have this conversation in a constructive manner. So thank you.
Yeah.
Have a good day. Have a good weekend.
Have a good day.
Thank you.
So I saw in the chat that we want to get together. This is definitely something we should consider. I'm not sure how much time we have left. According to Angelo, this meeting was supposed to last around 45 minutes. This is especially an issue that's going to be impacting us. So I believe we should schedule a meeting. You too, Joanne. I'm sorry. I'm at work. But yeah, due to time, I'm not sure if we're gonna be able to meet, but I think we definitely gonna do a meeting before Wednesday to get together with all of us and figure out a way that we as a collective can help put more pressure on the state so that we our tuition doesn't get increased, because I'm pretty sure that's something that none of us want. And I think that putting pressure on legislators and your own institutions, it's a good step to the right direction, guys. Anything else you want to add, Carla?
No, I completely agree with you, Luis. I think we should get another special meeting on the books. So we'll work on doing that as soon as possible so that we can come up with a game plan. And But I want to thank everyone for coming at such short notice on this important topic, though. We really appreciate having you here and fighting for students across the state. So thank you, everyone. And I think we're going to adjourn unless,
Yeah.
are we good to go,
Yeah.
Angelo?
Oh, we're good. Thank you.
Okay. Okay,
Awesome.
thank you, everyone.
Thank you guys, and we'll stay in touch, and we'll
Yep.
make sure we
Uh-huh.
engage with
Yep,
everyone.
great. Always good to have a conversation in a meeting where nothing gets done, guys. See you next time.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you guys.